G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and guys, it's finally here, the Star Wars Battlefront 2 beta. You see my friends, this beta is a very important one for the series. With the shockingly bad release of the first Star Wars Battlefront game from EA, there was a lot riding on the contents of this beta. Would this be the revival for the EA series that fans wanted to see? Would this game bring players the Star Wars Battlefront experience that they longed for? Would this game bring disappointed players from the first game back to ensure a healthier, longer lasting player base? As I said before, there was a lot riding on this beta, both for EA and for the player base. We've certainly heard some good news coming out of E3 in regards to this game, with promises of 3 times the amount of content from the previous title, which, well, let's be honest, isn't that hard to do with how little content there was in the original game, and an all-access post-release content plan that wouldn't split the player base up. As far as early news goes, it wasn't all doom and gloom, but with this beta, there is one thing that players will have answered that no amount of game trailers or news tidbits could answer. That being, is the gameplay any good? While the first Battlefront from EA was designed to be a more casual experience that more players could enjoy right off the bat, it was a common criticism that the game was just far too casual and lacked any degree of depth to keep players around for the long term. So the question remains, has Star Wars Battlefront 2 rectified that issue? Well guys, based on what I've seen so far, it's promising. I don't want to give a definite yet because we simply haven't seen enough of the content to make a fair judgment, but I can report that the gameplay does feel a lot nicer overall based on what we've been able to play in this beta. Let's take a look at some of the bigger changes that were made in this iteration of the series and how these said changes have improved the overall experience. Firstly, and most importantly in my opinion, we have the introduction of the classes to the game. The classes, while a fairly simple concept, has made leaps and bounds to add some much needed structure to the gameplay, and has allowed for some actual team play to surface, if you will. As players of the first Battlefront game will remember, there was no class system, or any structure to the customization at all, which allowed for players to really come up with any combination of abilities and weapons that they liked. So we at times saw every player and their dog jumping around with jump jets like no tomorrow. The gameplay as a result was, if I'm honest, chaotic as fuck, and the element of team play was absent at best. In Battlefront 2, we have 6 infantry classes available, 4 classes that can be used by default, and 2 that can be purchased for battle points, which I will get into in just a second here. Now, the 4 default classes are the Assault, Heavy, Officer, and Specialist, all of which have unique abilities and ways to influence the battle. For example, have the Heavies provide suppressing fire with the Sentry ability, all the while Assaults charge forward under the cover of that fire, with Officers buffing the team with their passive abilities. Once again, just with the introduction of these classes alone, the gameplay has become a lot more organised, less chaotic. Now, with these classes comes class-specific customization in the form of star cards. Star cards can be unlocked that change out what abilities your class has access to, or simply augment the abilities that you already have access to. And yes, before anyone races down to the comments section to type out an angry rant, I will be mentioning the star cards and the loot crates later in the video, so hold your horses. Another big change that has been made to the game comes in the form of the battle point system, which in my opinion is one of the better changes to have hit the game alongside the introduction of classes. Battle points are a currency that you accumulate in a match as you play, and they are awarded for doing basically anything that earns you points on the scoreboard. Killing enemies, playing the objective, supporting allies, all of the above will earn you battle points that can go towards unlocking vehicles, reinforcement classes, and heroes. As players of the first Battlefront EA game will remember, heroes, vehicles, and specialist weaponry could only ever be found on the battlefield itself in the form of tokens, which often meant that the person who got to play as Vader or as the X-Wing pilot was the person who knew where the spawn point was and was able to get there first for that token. Now, in theory, I can understand why DICE decided to go down this route at first, as they wanted to make sure that every player had an opportunity to get the full experience from the game by playing as the heroes and the vehicles. But in reality, the idea of having these force multipliers in the form of tokens just created an unnecessary barrier between players and these cool heroes and vehicles. Players would at times have to stop focusing on shooting enemies, you know, the gameplay behind a shooter game, and go on a scavenger hunt for these damn tokens. It was just damned unintuitive. However, now, with the battle point system, all players need to do is play the game as they would. It allows for players to call in force multipliers at their own discretion when they think the team needs it the most, and it rewards the players who are performing well with these slightly more powerful characters. Yes, it does in a way mean that not all players are going to have an equal opportunity to become the more exciting heroes, characters and vehicles, but that should in turn create a drive to get better at the game. It will also make getting these force multipliers a much more rewarding experience, so to me it's a win-win situation. And of course, how can I forget space battles? I think we remember the backlash that came from the announcement that Star Wars Battlefront 1 from EA, a Star Wars game, would have no space battles. The community's response was uncensored at best. But now guys, in this game we have proper space battles, and with that, proper starfighter controls. In the first game, it's safe to say that the controls for the starfighters were average at best. Very basic, with not a lot of control available to the players themselves. I mean, the ability to roll the starfighters independently was missing entirely. However, this time around we have Criterion working on the starfighter controls, and they have done a damn well excellent job here. Dogfighting in this game feels fantastic, and the presence of capital ships, cruisers, stationary defenses, AI-controlled fighters, it all makes the Starfighter Assault game mode feel hectic, but in a good way. The battle always feels populated and dynamic, with bombers and capital ships making runs on the objective, with fighters attempting to cover their attacks. It's just a dynamic experience that is a huge improvement over the previous iteration of the game mode in the last game. And yes, while the first game looked and sounded $1 million, this game looks and sounds $1 billion. DICE have set the standard with their games for graphical fidelity and sound design, and they continue to set the bar with Star Wars Battlefront 2, which is quite possibly the best sounding and looking game that they have ever created. The TIE Fighter laser burst ability has a particularly satisfying sound effect that makes it my favourite starfighter to fly alone. Yeah, I have my priorities, what of it? Don't you judge me, I can see you judging. Something I was particularly surprised with is how well my game ran on my old setup as well. I had the game running on medium settings on a 5-year-old PC, and it still managed to keep a solid 60 frames per second, so points has to go to DICE and the optimization here. However, there is a big fuck-off elephant in the room that we have to address with this game. It's been a point of focus amongst content creators and the general gaming media for this game that has heavily outshadowed the improvements that have been made to the general gameplay. We are of course talking about the star cards and the loot boxes that they come in. Ever since it was announced that the game would not have a season pass, gamers had begun to think that DICE was starting to learn from their mistakes, or at least EA was starting to learn from their mistakes, and that there was hope that Battlefront 2 would follow a similar post-release content plan to Titanfall 2, where all game-altering content and progression would be free to all players, with cosmetics being in the game in the form of microtransactions. Sadly, that is not the case here at all. In Battlefront 2, the majority of the progression appears to be coming in the form of these loot boxes, which contain scraps, star cards, and weapons for characters, which can be acquired through playing the game normally, or through buying them outright. The issue that many are taking with this payment model, and a significant issue that I also take with this payment model, is that inside these loot boxes are items that make your character significantly more powerful at certain playstyles. So not only is the progression of this game entirely random, but it can also be accelerated through investing extra money via microtransactions, which, as you can imagine, has put the game in the crosshairs of being a pay-to-win money-milking machine. And if the developers over at DICE really wanted to maximize the profits from these microtransactions, all they would really need to do is make the progression by default stupidly slow to incentivize extra investment from players, which is really fucking filthy if you ask me. You see guys, even if we had a progression system that is easy enough to progress down without any need for added investment, it's still going to hurt the play experience, as people will always be wondering with this game, did that guy just beat me because he put a few extra dollars into the game, or was it just a sheer amount of skill? The devs really had an opportunity here to do right by the community with this game. All they needed to do was follow in the footsteps of Titanfall 2 or Overwatch, only sell cosmetics in microtransactions, and keep the progression / game-changing post-release content free to all. But nope, clearly someone at EA had a different agenda for the cash cow that is Star Wars Battlefront 2. Will I still be getting the game? Yes. And don't you worry, I'll be making it very clear as to how the progression system is affected by these microtransactions in my full review for the game. The game had huge potential with all of the improvements that are being made to the gameplay, but the rather shady business model that is prominent in these microtransactions makes things iffy at best when it comes to Star Wars Battlefront 2. And folks, on that note, that concludes my thoughts of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 beta and the controversy that surrounds its microtransactions as its long-term payment model. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, backing of that like button would be greatly appreciated. And if you guys find yourself backing in that like button and you're new to the channel, then why don't you go ahead and back in that subscribe button whilst you're at it. Let me know what you think of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 beta in the comment section down below, if you guys have had a chance to play it, or say you've avoided the beta for a certain reason. Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd really love to hear what you guys all have to say. As per always, guys, my Discord is linked in the description down below if you guys want to get in touch with me, and of course I've also got my contact email there as well. Once again, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Have a good one.